Just going to read a very familiar passage of Scripture. And what I want to do is just simply share a thought with you tonight that God helped me with just yesterday, as a matter of fact. And I'm going to try my best not to be long tonight because I certainly want to have a few minutes of prayer time tonight, bringing in the new year tonight. So I'm going to do my best to be very brief tonight. But I just want to share a thought with you that God showed me yesterday. Philippians chapter number 3, I'll begin reading in verse number 12. Just going to be reading 3 verses tonight. Philippians 3:12 says, "Not as though I had already attained, either were already perfect, but I follow after, if that I may be apprehended, that for which also I am apprehended of Christ Jesus. Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto the things which are before. I press toward the mark for the prize of the high calling of God in Jesus Christ." I'm interested tonight in one verse, and I'm interested in one phrase that's found in that verse, and that is verse number 13. It says, "Brethren, I count not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do." Notice this statement. He says, "Forgetting those things which are behind, and reaching forth unto those things which are before." He says, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before. Yesterday morning, I got up early, and we had a bunch of trash that I needed to get rid of. So I got up, got it all loaded up, and threw it in the back of the truck, and got ready to leave to bring it over town to dispose of it. And as I got in my truck, I sat down and started it up, and I looked up on the windshield, and I noticed something. My rearview mirror was missing. And so I began to look around in the truck for it a little bit, and finally I found it, and it was on the passenger side on the floor of the truck. As I reached down to pick it up, I picked it up, and I went down to the building to look to see if I had some tape or glue or something that I could glue it back up or tape it back up on the windshield with. But when I got back to the truck, and as I began to put that mirror back in its place, something just hit me. Just out of the blue, it hit me. And as I began to hang that mirror back up in its place where it belongs, I thought something to myself. Why am I hanging this mirror back up? And obviously we all know why do we need a rear view mirror? So we can see behind us, right? Okay. So I began to think about that. My thoughts began to focus around the rear view mirror, being able to see the things which are behind us. And I began to think about that. Then as I began to think about that, there was a thought that came to me. As I looked at this small mirror, I then began to focus my attention on the larger windshield that I needed to glue this thing back onto. And as I began to think about that, while I was gluing that, or attempting to glue that back on there, this is the thought that came to me. The designers of this truck that I have would much more, obviously wanted me to be able to see much more of what was in front of me versus what was behind me. You notice it in your vehicle, the front windshield is a lot bigger than the rear windshield. And I believe that that's for one reason. And this is the thought that came to me. Why is the front windshield bigger than the back windshield? The thought that hit me was, that just tells me that where I'm going is much more important than where I've been or where I come from. That's the thought that God gave me yesterday when I was doing some things. And we have a brand new year approaching with endless possibilities. And with God's help, I believe that in 2017, with God's help, we can make the best of what's yet to come for us. Like I said, where I'm headed is much more important than where I just come from or where I've been. And I've been doing a lot of soul searching. I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks, about how far we've come these past 2 years as a church. I began to pull out some different things, some different business meeting things and attendance records and this and that, and began to look back over some things just the other day. And as I began to look at those things, as I began to think about those things, it didn't matter what I had in my hand or what I was looking at. It seemed like everything that I looked at, it seemed like every time I would glance down and look at something else, it seemed like the old devil was just sitting right there on my shoulder the whole time saying, it doesn't matter, it ain't ever going to get any better than it is right now. No matter what I looked at, it seemed like the devil was sitting right there saying that, it's as good as it's ever going to get. I began to look back at the attendance records that we had during our first spring revival when I was here in 2015. We averaged over 100 people a night in April for that revival. I pulled out the list for Jubilee in 2015, October of last year. The same thing. We averaged a little bit more during Jubilee than we did during our spring revival. I went back and I pulled out this past year's Jubilee, and we averaged over 130 a night. And yet the old devil was still sitting right there on my shoulder, saying the same thing to me. You'll not do that again next year, preacher. But here's what God was saying. He was sitting on the other shoulder at the same time. He said, it doesn't matter how many came in 2015. It doesn't matter how many came in 2016, because that's all in the rearview mirror now. Doesn't matter. It's in the past. There's no sense in looking back at it anymore. Now you must focus your attention. You must set your goals. You must look ahead. Put your attention to the things that are going to take place in 2017, in the new year. And as I began to think about that, he's exactly right. 2016 is closing really fast. And 2017 is approaching very quickly. I spoke to a friend of mine just the other day. He's had a really bad year. He's had a rough year. Things just didn't go the way that he had planned this year. And that's that's not a surprise to me. If your luck is anything like mine, things never go as planned. But as I was talking to him, and he was telling me all the things that had happened to him this year, he began to tell me about how his health started declining. He's an older gentleman. He's had some pretty serious health conditions I didn't know anything about. I hadn't seen him in a while. Was telling me about how work is slowed down for him. He had some family issues, some family things that needed attention that happened in 2016. He said, Scott, he said, my plans were simple. He said, my plans were, and he went back a couple years and had a goal set. He said, my plans for 2016 was to concentrate my efforts in paying all my bills off. My efforts were going to be focused on just, getting everything in order so that I could retire at the end of 2017. He said, now, with my health declining, with work being slow as it is, with the medical bills piling up, and because he hadn't been able to work very much, he says, now I am further in the hole than I was when I started. And he said, and I'll never, at least for the next 10 years, he says, I will not get to retire. And he says, and that's just if things, start getting better for me this year. Everything, he said, that I've worked so hard for this year, in these past 2 years, these past 3 years, he says it's all down the tubes. It doesn't matter now, because now I'm further away from my goal, from what I had planned on, where I had planned on being this time next year. I looked at him and I said, it sounds like you have had a rough year. It does sound like things, haven't gone the way that you had planned for them to go. But I said, believe it or not, there is some good news to all of this. All that stuff is behind us. You can't do anything about it. But you can start over in 2017. You have to take your eyes off the rearview mirror and start looking out the front windshield to where 2017 is going to take you. We talked a little bit more, and I had prayer with him, and I hope that I did him some good, but you just never know. But that's exactly what the Apostle Paul just said in this chapter of Philippians. That's what he's saying in his verse. He says, there's a higher calling for my life. He said, and in order for me to press toward the mark of that high calling of God, I can't dwell in the past anymore. I can't keep living in my past. I can't keep dwelling on what I did or how I used to live or how I used to be. He said, if I want to reach the prize, he says, I have to focus on the things that I can see that are in front of me and not on the things that I've left behind me in the rearview mirror. And that's what Paul's saying in this verse. But it's the exact same thing with us as Christians, as a father, as a mother, as a husband, as a wife, as a son, as a daughter. This past year in 2016, I probably had maybe 20 calls, give or take a few. 20 calls from strangers, people that I didn't know, talking about how rough this past year has been for them. Whether it's been, on their marriage, or how rough it's been on them at their job, how they've been treated by someone, or maybe one instance how bad somebody even treated somebody else. And every time that I was talking to them, every time in the conversation, they all would say, at one time or another during the conversation, they all would say, if I could just go back there and take what I said back, or do what I did, take it back, start that day completely over, things would be better. And every time I'd say the same thing. I'd say, the reality of it is this. You can't. So there's no sense in dwelling on what you can't change. Thinking about what you should have done differently, to me, is a waste of time. Because you can't go back and you can't change what you did. But looking to the front windshield and asking God for wisdom on how to fix things, instead of dwelling and beating yourself up about what happened, the thing that we need to do is to remember that we need to move forward. 2017 is quickly and fastly approaching. 2016 it is gone. We got 3 days left. We need to focus on the front windshield of what lies ahead. As a Christian, maybe there were goals that you set for yourself in 2016 that you didn't accomplish. Maybe you set a goal that you wanted to reach a certain number of people for Christ. Maybe you had planned on being in church more in 2016 than you were in 2015. I had a friend, a church that we used to go to. I don't remember exactly how the conversation got started, but a New Year's resolution was, my resolution is I want to be more faithful to the house of God. And I remember the conversation a few months later, 6 months later, maybe now. I don't remember exactly how long ago or how long it was. But the conversation went something like this. I thought you said you wanted to be more faithful. And his remark was, well, I only attended church 2 times last year, and I've already attended it 4 times this year. So that means I'm being more faithful, right? That's not what that means, because he was only in church 2 or 3 times the year before. Being faithful is more than just attending church 2 times a year. If you make the commitment to God that you're going to be faithful, then you need to uphold that commitment, and you need to be faithful to God. I don't know personally where each and every one of you are at as a Christian. I don't know. Maybe this year, 2016, maybe you fell short of the mark. Maybe you fell short of the goal. But again, all of that doesn't matter, because right now it's in the rearview mirror. There's nothing we can do. We can't be more faithful now in 2016 than we were in 2015. But we can look at the windshield in front of us. Because where we're going, remember, is more important than where we just came from. And Paul said the same thing. He says, forgetting those things which are behind. Whatever your goal was in 2016 as a Christian, maybe you wanted to be in a certain place spiritually in 2016 and you didn't quite get there. The good news is you still have 2017 to hit that goal. Leave everything in 2016 as a Christian and bring in 2017 with bigger and better things. As a church, I was thinking about this. You know, as a church, we can't live in 2015. We can't live in 2016. Now we have to set our sights on what God has in store for us in 2017. I'm excited about 2017. There was a lot of things that I was hoping that would happen, the things that some personal goals that I had set in place for myself, and where I thought spiritually that we needed to be as a church. And there were some things that I was hoping for that didn't happen in 2015. They didn't happen in 2016, and that's okay. That's okay. I'm not going to dwell and sit in my office with this mirror and just look in it all day long and try to, where did 2016 go? I didn't get to do this. We didn't do this. We didn't do this. That's a waste of my time. The Apostle Paul said it best. He said, just forget those things. Forget them. Leave them in the past. Leave them behind. We got 2017. God, I've been praying for so many things, for God to do so many things. I've had people come up to me and ask me to pray for certain things for them, that personal goals, things that they wanted to see happen in their own life, things that they wanted to see happen in the church. And I've prayed with some people, prayed for some people. I just know this. If we want to move forward as a church in 2017, and we need to quit looking in this because it's gone, it's behind us. Where we're going is much more important than where we come from. I wanted to share that thought with you tonight as we bring in the new year. I just want you to remember, as a church, as a family, as a Christian, too many times that's what we do. We live in our past. And too many times our past, too many of us can't forget our past. And then when we can't forget our past, the Apostle Paul said over in the 1 Corinthians, I believe, that I am what I am because of the grace of God. And we'll never get there dwelling and living in our past, because it'll just eat us up. Forgetting the things which are behind, the big picture, looking out the big windshield in front of us is where we need to set our focus for 2017. I hope you'll take that little thought with you tonight, and as you begin, as many folks do, I don't know if you want a show of hands. Has anybody set New Year's resolutions? I'm not going to ask you what they are, but the most common. I heard a story. The most common New Year's resolution is weight loss. I heard a story the other day about a gentleman that had made his mind up that he was going to lose weight this coming year. It was last year, and every morning he would get on the scale and he would weigh himself, and his wife would walk by the bathroom where the scale was, and she would see him every morning sucking his gut in. And finally she said to him, she says, honey, she says, sucking your gut in isn't going to make the scale, isn't going to help you. It's not going to make the scale get any lighter. And he said, it may not get lighter, but it sure helps me see the numbers at the bottom of it. Whatever your New Year's resolution is, if you set one, just remember, just because you didn't hit a goal or a mark in 2016, say bye-bye to it in the rearview mirror, and let's make 2017 a great year, not only as a Christian, but as a church as well, because we got so many things. I believe God wants to do so many great things. And I believe that God's going to do a lot of great things in 2017. So I hope you'll take that tonight. Just remember that as you make your resolution. Just leave it in the past. What's back there, leave it. and let's look forward to the big picture in 2017. So what I want to do tonight, just to close our service,